MCPs and NA10. Let's put them together to create a system that is actually useful for teams. I'll take you through a simple form that any team member can use regardless of their skill level. Nothing to install, no prompt experience required, just two fields, a URL, a description of the change. It triggers a workflow that builds an experience and creates the experience and experiment in Convert. So I'll be using Convert's MCP tool for this. Even though in my previous video, we were able to create an experiment pretty much from a single prompt in Claude Code, using a small model, by the way, I mentioned that this was probably not the process that I would roll out across an organization or across a team. It's good for individuals to use, but not good for teams to use. So let's dig into that a little bit more. The number one problem for me is risk. Though way too many times that the test was made active without me explicitly wanting it to go active. So Claude Code just made the unilateral decision to just put a test live. And that makes me worried because MCP configs have all sorts of connections available to it. And these connections just lie dormant. So in any sort of conversation, Claude Code or whatever chat tool that anyone's using can decide to just action using a tool. And that could lead to unintended consequences. So that's a huge risk. There's also a potential security risk of MCP because of the way that it streams data to the apps that it's controlling. So if it's an API, it streams events over to the API. And I've heard rumblings that there's some security problems with that. And there's also the logistics of managing all of these MCP configs and all of these tools that everybody's using. And depending on the size of that organization, that could be a big headache. And all these issues are amplified by the non-standard way that everybody's going to be working. Everybody's going to be working in their own way. And that leads to inconsistencies and inefficiencies as well, where somebody may be able to do a task in 3 minutes, and for some, it may take half an hour. And ideally, you want to be able to roll out efficiency gains across an entire organization very simply. So if you find a new way of doing things, if you add another sort of process loop into it, say, from now on, everybody needs to run this QA loop after they put a test live, it may be tough to roll out these improvements across teams. And this brings us to an AI system. And think of an AI system as a workflow or a set of workflows that are maintained and managed by experts who know this specific task really well and are able to add optimizations that can be inherited by the entire team. So now let me take you through an example of such a workflow. This is not going to be how to build tutorial. Instead, it's just going to give you a tour of the architecture and hopefully a good idea about how you can build something like this for yourself. Okay, so I've shown you this already. So basically URL, describe the change, and when you submit, it triggers the workflow, and here's the workflow. This is the form submission. So the first step is that it would go and fetch the HTML. So this goes and fetches the page HTML. So whatever page URL you put in there, it fetches a page HTML. Then it uses that HTML to create the JavaScript. So the JavaScript is created here. And then this additional step, which needs to be cleaned up a little bit, but this just names the experiment. So based on the change, based on what it's doing, it just provides a name for the experiment. The other thing to point out is that this workflow only came about after I was working with Claude Code with the MCP tool. So with the MCP tool in Claude Code, you get to see the thinking, the rationale that it's making these calls and stuff like that. You get an idea about how it goes about to create the experiment, create the variation, and what steps it takes. And then from there, you're able to just sketch out, okay, this is the flow that I'm going to create. Having this in a flow like this, these are the steps that the LLM would take. So being able to just lay it out like this gives a lot more control. And also it means I'm able to see what the inputs and outputs are for each step. But anyway, so this is the, as I was saying, creates a JavaScript, names the experiment, and then goes around. And then what this one does, this just sets all the variables. So instead of reaching back in the next steps to find all the variable names, this just collects them together. So it's just a little bit easier to manage for the next steps. And then this is the first call to create an experiment or an experience using Convert. And this is an API call. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking APIs are complex. That's why we went to MCPs, to just avoid using APIs. But here's the problem. APIs, yes, are complex, especially with all the docs and everything. But MCPs, for my liking, go a little bit too far. And they're fine for messing around, but when you're creating a workflow, you really need to get more control into it. So you need to find a middle ground. And so this is where the tool called MCPO comes in. Okay, sidetrack time. This is MCPO. And what it does is, imagine you've got an MCP server config, you've got loads of tools defined. What this does is it houses all of those tools, and then it makes them available from one single URL, and it converts them into a well-documented API. So here's an example of that. So this is, I have it installed, and then when I run it, these are my MCP tools, and they're all available on this URL. And each of these tools are, in effect, APIs. So this is like an API server now that I'm running on my MCPO side. And it's nice because it gives you all this information about the endpoints. So really well documented. So these are all of the things that are available, and also you can lock it down. So this is the response body that you need to send for that query string. So you can just copy and paste that into N8N. And then this is the HTTP request that will be made. And you can even try it out. So if you type in, say, search for A/B test setup and then execute it, it will make a call. So it tells you this is the curl request that's been made. This is the full request URL. So this is what you'd use as the request URL in the HTTP request in N8N. And then this is the response body that you get back. You can check that everything's working okay. And these are the response headers. So it's really nice. It just means that you can go, when you're working on Claude Code, request JSON, test it out in here, make sure it works, and then you've got all the information you need to set up each one of these endpoints, these HTTP requests. So this one's going to convert experiences, and then I've got the authorization here. This is the key that I put in. And then this is the JSON that I got from after I tested it through the MCPO, and I got it from Claude Code after it was making its requests. Actually, what I did was I got Claude Code to give me that. So I said, give me the requests that you made to this thing, and it just gave me this JSON, and then put the necessary information in, just like a normal workflow. And this is cool because N8N by default is not great working with MCPs, but it's very good at working with APIs. So this makes it available as an API. And also it's very good because it just reduces that risk, because now everything's constrained. So all this HTTP request node does is it creates an experience. It can't set it active. It can't do anything other than what I've got it to do here. So that's what an MCPO is. I install it, and then I use the URL that I get from MCPO in here. Hope that makes sense. But anyway, I'll continue to the next step. This is a step where after it's got the response, this just takes our response and then extracts the necessary IDs in order to make the next call, which is again making a call to API endpoint, creating the variation. So adding the JavaScript for the variation. Anyway, let's give this a whirl. So if we execute this, and it gives us a form. Let's reload this. It's a form, https a.com, that's my site, and I'll say thick red border around entire page, just to test it out, and then submit it, and then we can see it in action. So it's going through step by step. It fetched the HTML. It used that HTML. So here's the HTML that it got. It's naming the experiment. I need to update this to make it more efficient because it made 2 calls there. But that didn't take too long, and it's done. If we head on over, what did they call it? What was the name of the experiment? Thick red border. Okay, so let's go to app.convert and thick red border. That's my test. That's a variation. Edit variation code. Just make sure the JavaScript is there, and it's there. Cool. So this works, and it's a lot more stable. It's a lot more accurate. It's a lot more consistent, and it's just much, much cheaper because I'm building around tools and just adding AI just as some glue to make things work nicely. Hopefully you found this useful, and hopefully this gives you some ideas about how you can build workflows with MCPs in a way that you can roll out across teams and share efficiency gains. In the next video, I'll be going deeper into this build and show you how I actually went about building this thing, so you get a better idea about how you can build something like this for yourself. See you next time.